What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. We're stoked to bring you guys this next episode because we're talking about all things. What are we talking about here today?
We're going to be talking about weight loss resistance.
Weight loss resistance. And if you guys are only listening right now, you can't see that we are filming this in our studio. We still only have one mic, so you'll probably hear audio will be a little weird because we're going back and forth between the mic right now, but we're rocking with it. We just need to get another microphone and this little amp thing. We just have been procrastinating doing it, but this is a perfect example of, hey, if you don't have all the right things, you can still do the damn thing. And we're doing it.
There is no perfect time. You do not need to have everything perfectly lined up. You're going to refine over time anyways, but it feels so good to be back. Let me tell you, it feels good to be back home. It feels good to be back on the podcast. We have had quite the last 3 weeks. Yeah. In the last 3 weeks, we've literally been into 3 different states. One was out of the country. And then we've also had just like a very busy work week crammed into those 3 weeks. So it's been bonkers.
It has been bonkers. Like our routine's been off. I was like really good about cold plunging for like 6 or 7 weeks. But with being out of town for, almost more than 2 full weeks out of 3 weeks as a whole, plus crazy busyness, have fallen out of sync. But we're back in sync here finally as we're starting out the first week of May, and it feels good. It feels good to be back in routine.
Yeah, I got a full 7 weeks back home. You've got some travel coming up, but man, it's nice to be able to come back to the podcast, have a routine with like just bringing you guys the value that we so love to bring you guys. So Mason said we're going to be talking about weight loss resistance today because I think it is. I always feel like I'm like literally so hunched.
Yeah.
Oh my God, my posture is terrible.
I always think about fixing my posture all the time. Yeah. Just complete sidebar. Like I just like notice I'm so big, not like huge, but I'm like almost 6'4". I'm 242 pounds. 241 pounds as of this morning. So big dude.
Yeah.
And I always notice like I'm cramming myself into airplane seats and I'm just like,
I know.
I'm like hunched over and like the seat's like completely up and I'm like this. And it's always like, Yeah. So posture is another thing. I'm always like trying to
be a little bit better about
to get better about
conscious about your posture. Anyways, it just kind of got me thinking about that. Weight loss resistance is something that I've experienced firsthand myself. And I think more often than not, people experience it at some point in their weight loss journey, because weight loss is typically not just a one and done thing. It's kind of, maybe you have a period where you lose weight and then you maybe gain a little bit back and then you try to lose weight again. But at some point you likely end up finding, or maybe you already have, that you will get to kind of the sticking point. And so we want to talk a little bit about that, maybe why that happens and how you can start to push past that.
Yep.
Yeah. Have you?
I was ready for you to kick us off.
So at the very, very core of it, you need to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight, right? Like you should probably know this at this point. Maybe you've heard that term being thrown around. Maybe you've even been in a calorie deficit yourself before, but it's literally the basic law of, not to sound too scientific here, but the basic law of thermodynamics, where you essentially are going to be like, you need to burn more calories than you are consuming a day. And that's a calorie deficit.
Yeah. As to just sum that up too, like it's the like, I'm sure you guys have heard this from every nutrition coach, any person on social media. If you've browsed through TikTok and you went like, how do I lose weight or whatever, everyone's going to say calorie deficit. Oh, like you're an idiot. Like it's only the calorie deficit, which is true. It is true.
Who's that guy on TNF?
Oh yeah. There's like, there's guys on social media, TikTok specifically, that like to just like rip people's content because they think they're right. And a lot of what they're saying is true. Not to knock these creators, but they are creators that like to just, speak in absolutes. And when we're talking about the space that we're about to talk about and the things we're about to dive into a little bit further here, in the world that we live in, when we're dealing with internal imbalances and inflammation and people that have chronic dieted for long periods of time, the simple answer of like just be in a caloric deficit doesn't always hold true. Yes, it does. And this is where it gets complicated for a lot of people, because it can hold a lot of truth, and it does, right? If someone goes into a caloric deficit, they will lose weight. But when people are dealing with imbalances, when they're dealing with things going on internally, if they've dieted for long periods and they caused a lot of internal damage, their rate of success is going to be a hell of a lot slower than another person. And that's why in most cases, sometimes just going to a caloric deficit and telling somebody who has done that for years and years and years consistently and fucked themselves up, for lack of a better term, is going to struggle a lot. And in most cases, it's not the best choice to just go into a caloric deficit. We must go the other way and do other things first to heal the body so we can see the good response. And that's the world that we live in. And like Audrey was saying, there's a lot of creators, when we talk about that world and we talk about doing those things in that manner, we'll be like, oh, these coaches don't know what the fuck they're doing. When in reality, we're smart as fucking shit. Okay. not to say that in an arrogant way, but like, and we never lead into that and play into that, but there's a whole other side of the coin that people refuse to look at and refuse to acknowledge more than anything, and say it's just this one way, when in reality, it's not always just that one way.
Yeah. You try telling like Susie, who's been dieting for 10 plus years, decades, that she just needs to eat less and move more. Like, no shit, Sherlock. She's been trying to do that for a long time. And yes, does she probably have some slip ups? And does she probably have some inconsistencies within her diet? Sure. Most of us do, right? But in a lot of cases, those women or those people, I don't want to just specify women, but those people experience weight loss resistance, not for outside reasons. And we'll talk about those right now. But what a calorie deficit fails to address, and those who just solely say it's about a calorie deficit, is how your body becomes less efficient at burning those calories. And that happens through metabolic adaptation, through hormonal changes, maybe even through microbiome and gut health imbalances as well. So you can't just look at a calorie deficit and say, if you're not losing weight, you're not in a calorie deficit. Like at the very, very core, yes. But for you to be eating 14, 13, 1200 calories, be exercising 5-6 days a week, staying active throughout the day and not losing any weight, and somebody tells you you're not in a calorie deficit, you should eat less, I would argue it is very unhealthy and definitely not the route that we would tell you to take.
Right. Because you experience that a lot too.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And we see it all the time, right? It's not just something that we're just pulling this out of our ass. We've seen it happen. It's definitely a very real thing. To give you guys a little bit of a background story, when we moved to Chicago, I was going through already like a lot of hormonal changes. I knew, because I felt so moody. I was crying all the time. Obviously, a lot of stress came with moving to Chicago. And we had just pulled out of a competition prep. We weren't too deep yet, but we were starting to kind of plant the seed for it. And I was already doing a lot of cardio. And anyway, so we pulled out of that dieting phase. And when we moved to Chicago, I noticed I was starting to put on weight pretty quickly. I think I had gained like 6 pounds in 2 weeks, which for someone my frame is quite a bit. And for somebody who monitors their weight, is quite a bit. So, and it felt like a lot of inflammation. So what did I do? I knew what I have always done, which is, well, if I want to lose more weight, I'm just going to get a little bit more consistent. I'm going to drop my calories a little bit more, and I'm going to focus on doing more cardio and more steps. So I got to the point where I was eating about 1,500 calories. Because we lived in downtown Chicago, I was walking about 15,000 steps every day, training 4 to 5 days a week. And I kept gaining weight. It just kept packing on. And I was definitely more consistent than I had been in the past. And it's because I had literally tanked hormones. My adrenal glands weren't functioning properly, and just a lot of stress on my body. And I'd been dieting at that point for a long time without taking a break away from it. So my body had become very, very inefficient at burning those calories. And for me to eat less calories and try and do more cardio would have only exacerbated the internal health issues that was causing the weight loss resistance in the first place.
Yeah. And that's so crucial. What she just mentioned there is like, because I witnessed this firsthand of Audrey going through the struggles, like seeing firsthand, like knowing she's putting in the work, seeing the frustrations she had, like she's just confused. She doesn't know what's going on. And like, this is, and she understood to an extent what was going on, but like just more frustrated that the changes weren't happening, but then slowly realizing, shit, like this is happening to me. And, we live in a world where, if you're just a normal human being and you just, you work a job and you don't really spend much time educating yourself in the fitness space, you're not a coach or you're not going to have any goddamn clue why you're not seeing results. It's just going to be like you being like, okay, well, the diet didn't work. or this thing isn't working, or cardio doesn't work for me, or lifting weights just doesn't work for me. It's, it doesn't work for my body. It's not that those things don't work for you. It's just that there's something else going on internally that you don't know about, right? It's like a silent killer. It's doing stuff to you and causing you all these issues, these weight loss resistance issues that you just have no idea about. So like, especially from a female's perspective, can this stuff happen to men? Yes, it can. It's more rare just because a male's body is more resilient. Men can go in through crash diets and lose a bunch of weight and, put it back on, but then go back into it and lose more weight just because there's more variables at play with women that
Yeah.
they face these issues when they do that harm to their body, because women's bodies just can't handle as much stress as men can. And one thing to note is, like, when we're dieting, pulling food lower, doing cardio, training hard, that's a lot of stress on the body. So it's just something to be aware of. Now, all that is going to add up to, like we mentioned, those possible solutions or those possible things that are going to happen. But, it just kind of all circles back to, now that you know that that's a possibility and that's happening. And if you're someone who's falling down that road, that's why we're talking about, like, and oftentimes, like, the caloric deficit and doing more cardio and going back into that cycle. That's why you're seeing a lot of resistance. That's why you're seeing a lot of struggle. That's why the weight's not coming off as fast. That's why you're feeling a little bit more frustrated. And that's why when you're doing these things, you're probably feeling even more low energy. Other things are starting to, take a hit. Your digestion, all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're only going to the bathroom 2 to 3 times a week. You don't know why, right? So all these things, this is more or less, there's an answer to why things aren't working the way that they're working. It's not just because, like, you're getting older. It's not because you just turned 37. It's not just because, you're entering or exiting menopause, right? Those are other things that could be causing differences. But just because your body's experiencing differences doesn't mean you can't learn to work with it and see the same amount of success.
Yeah, essentially, when you have all of these internal health issues going on, your body is more in like fat conserving and fat storage mode, versus when we fix those underlying root problems, such as maybe your thyroid health or your cortisol levels and adrenal function. Maybe you have severe estrogen dominance. There's so many other things hormonally, or maybe you have insulin resistance, right? And then you talk about different gut health issues, like there's bacteria in your gut. Your gut is where it all starts. That is important for your metabolic function. And so if there are all of these pieces going on, as well as a slowed metabolism from chronically dieting, you pushing for more fat loss is not going to be the solution, because you'll likely just end up causing more issues hormonally, causing more issues metabolically. And until you address those pieces, you won't be able to finally see some success, at least see it more easily and actually keep it, rather than, losing it quickly, but then those issues arise and make it even harder. And so the typical cycle is usually somebody, let's say we've got Susie over here. She loses the weight. She did a calorie deficit. First time she's ever really tried to diet and worked hard towards it, right? And then she lost the weight, but she doesn't reverse diet properly, which is extremely important. She doesn't reverse diet properly to get her body back into homeostasis, kind of get her metabolism firing again after a dieting period. And then maybe she starts to put a little bit of weight back on, because let's face it, nobody can really sustain a calorie deficit that's aggressive for very long. So then she puts on a little bit more weight, and then she tries to lose weight again. Well, this time when she tries to lose weight, her metabolic function isn't quite where it would have been had she taken the time to do a reverse diet. So now she's trying to diet harder. She's eating less calories. She's running more, or, working out harder, and not seeing nearly as much progress as she saw the first go around. And that's because of those, especially metabolic pieces that she didn't address. And so weight loss resistance is very, very much so a real thing. And anybody who says it is not, is failing to address that the body is it's much more complex than just calories in, calories out. Like, yes, it is, but other pieces influence and impact how efficiently you are at burning and consuming those calories. Not consuming, but burning.
Yeah. And it just comes to a point to where it's like things are much more than just eat less, move more. We hear that all the time. And again, like, it works, right? It does. It's always going to be the first sort of path we're going to go down if we're going to lose weight. But then it's like, for these people, whether it's you, women, men out there that are doing things and wholeheartedly, okay, I'm not like cheating. I'm actually being consistent. I'm actually doing this stuff, eating lower amounts of food. I'm training. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And I'm just struggling so hard. And I just feel like everything is so freaking hard. I promise you, there's a rhyme, there's a reason. More than likely, you're facing weight loss resistance. More than likely, there's an undercover thing going on, or something going on internally, or something you haven't really looked at, or something we haven't really addressed within your body that is making you experience that resistance, right? So don't think it's here. I think it's just so common now because I feel like there's so many more people out there that struggle with this, that don't know it and just think it's your genetics, or think it's just your age, or you think it's just you getting older, or just the things not working, when in reality, the vessel isn't just functioning properly. Your vessel isn't in the right state to be able to create the right amount of change in the right amount of time without the amount of resistance that you're experiencing, right? So there's a rhyme, there's a reason, and this is oftentimes, and nowadays, probably one of the bigger issues that people face, because we're talking weight loss resistance, but this is also just like stemming from people that just have gut health issues, deal with a lot of inflammation, really imbalanced hormones, adrenal insufficiency. Like, these are just issues that stem from there, and more than likely not, a lot of those come with some form of weight loss resistance too.
Yeah.
Woo!
I know, we were just firing away there. Yeah, guys, if you're wondering if you have weight loss resistance, if you're somebody who has been chronically dieting for years, or maybe you've been trying to diet now for 6+ months, you haven't seen any weight loss, but you have truly been consistent at eating lower calories, sticking to what your calorie deficit calories should be. And that's obviously all different and context dependent. But if you have been consistently hitting lower macros, consistently hitting calorie deficit calories, or what should be, you're doing higher amounts of cardio. If you are consistent across the board and all of the components that play a role in you being able to lose weight, and you are not, then that's the time to look further into what is causing that weight loss resistance, right? And in most cases, in nearly all cases, the best route for you to take from there is not to continue to diet, but rather to enter into a reverse diet where you can slowly bring up your food over time. No, you will likely not gain a ton of body fat if you are consistent. This is the beauty of a reverse diet, while also making sure that you are addressing any sort of issues, maybe hormonally, or if you're bloated all the time, maybe addressing what is going on within your gut health, so that you can get your body back into homeostasis, so that when you do revisit a dieting phase in the future, you will not see as much resistance as you currently are.
100%.
That's it from us.
That's all we got for you guys today. So if you're tuned in with us through Spotify, Apple, iTunes, whatever the hell listening platform, we appreciate it for tuning in. If you found this valuable, you enjoyed it, you liked it, feel free to share it to a story, share it with a friend. We don't do any sort of promotion. This is all organic stuff. And if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for messing with us over the course of this. I don't even know how long this podcast was, but we will see you guys in the next one.
Bye, guys.